back to the Ed Morrissey Show. Today is Tuesday, September 8th, 2015. Joining me as always on Tuesdays, Andrew Malcolm, the Prince of Twitter at @Malcolm. And of course, the wisdom flowing from investors.com/Andrew Malcolm speaks for itself. Welcome back to the show, sir.
Hey, thank you. Good to be here as always. This is my Tuesday. I love Tuesdays now.
Tuesdays are great. I love Tuesdays as well. I especially love Tuesdays when I'm not traveling, which is kind of nice. I've been traveling a lot this summer, but it's kind of settled down now, which is good.
Yeah, well, and Tuesdays after a Monday off are also nice.
They are. Tuesdays after a Monday. So how was your Labor Day?
You know, for all these years, since the 60s when I was working in regular newspaper jobs, I often said, not that anybody listened, but that I would work an extra 8 hours a week free if I could do it in 4 days. The 3-day weekends are so wonderful, you know. But if I could do 4 12-hour days, like I guess some people do in some news organizations, that would be wonderful. Those 3-day weekends are glorious.
You know, it's interesting because one of the places that I used to run, we had schedules like that. We actually had 10-hour days, and not me. I was in there Monday through Friday, but for the people who worked for me, they had 10-hour days, and they worked 4 days in 1 week and 3 days in the next, and that was a full-time position. So, and then there was usually plenty of opportunity for overtime for people who really wanted it. But yeah, people told me the same thing. They loved the schedule, and they'd quit if we ever changed it from the rotation, because they had every other weekend off, and every other weekend was a 3-day weekend for them. And so, yeah, just the way it was structured, every other weekend was a 3-day weekend. Of course, every other weekend they had to work a 3-day weekend, but they were all right with that. 26 out of 52 wasn't bad. They were okay.
Yeah. So, do you have the email for that HR person over there?
Yeah, I think it's on Hillary Clinton's server, isn't it? Along with everything else.
No. I was joking about making a job application to the Human Resources, but no, they might delete it too. They might delete it.
It might be considered personal.
There was a tweet that had Rand Paul's picture, but it wasn't his tweet. And it said, so if the NSA is collecting everybody's emails, how come we haven't gotten Hillary's from them?
Yeah, one has to wonder, right? But I mean, it's interesting. Did you see this just happened on Twitter? ABC News is going to have an exclusive. You and I have talked about the term exclusive. They're going to have an exclusive interview with Hillary Clinton tonight, which means, of course, in media parlance, no one else was in the room with them at the time that this was going on.
And she's not going to do another one today. Yeah,
that's right, exactly. And as it turns out, she actually apologizes for the email thing. She says that was my mistake. I'm sorry about that. This is after
she's getting desperate. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of interesting. I mean, earlier today, I guess I could probably try to play the audio on this, but Andrea Mitchell was talking about her interview with Hillary Clinton, which aired on Friday, and I think was probably taped the day before, but it aired on Friday. And she had 15 minutes with Hillary Clinton and asked, 12 questions about the email server. And they were not easy questions. They weren't setups. They weren't softball questions. And she was actually kind of pressing her on that. But Hillary Clinton refused to say that she was sorry or to provide an explanation. And Andrea Mitchell was on Morning Joe today saying, well, I finally had to kind of stop asking questions because I was afraid that they were going to shut down the interview. So I had to move on to another topic. And I'm thinking to myself, man, that would be perfect if they shut down the interview. What journalist wouldn't want that? I have asked such tough questions.
Great video.
Yeah, I mean, really, honestly, I mean, I don't want to be too harsh because I actually think that Andrea Mitchell asked her tough questions, and we've been on Andrea Mitchell's back for tossing softballs and mixing in her own opinion on what are supposed to be news segments. But it wasn't actually a bad interview in terms of trying to get an answer on tough questions from Hillary Clinton, but she refused to apologize on Friday. Now, David Muir interviewed her today, and just coincidentally, after the NSA and the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency reconfirmed that the data that was on her server that was emailed to her was top secret compartmented information, all of a sudden she's sorry about that.
Yeah. This is what you get with the Clintons. You get parsing, skating around the edges of legality, and sometimes going into it, skating around the edges of truth in explaining it, refusing to apologize, then apologizing, and I guess they do it because they think it works. It certainly worked with Bill and his problems, but I don't know if the country is ready for 4 or 8 more years of this. I mean, it's so tiresome, so tiring to have these constant things pop up, and then you see her with that little cackle trying to explain it and dismiss it as, I didn't follow government policy, but it doesn't really matter because she's specially entitled. And making fun of the media for asking the questions is just a distraction, political distraction by the right-wing conspiracy, yada, yada, yada. It's, boy, I mean, this is like marrying Donald Trump. You know what's going to happen in the end. But anyway, it's a mess, and she's counting on us, and I guess it's working with me, of getting tired of keeping track of, well, she did this, but they didn't say this, and she didn't know this, and it wasn't marked, and that's got nothing to do with it.
No, it's irrelevant because, first off, the reason why it wasn't marked is because it was put into the email system by her own people, and in some cases by herself, and they didn't mark it. I mean, that's part of what the issue is here. And the second issue, of course, is that she's the one who created the email server in the first place, which was designed. And this was the part that Andrea Mitchell was saying that she couldn't get Hillary to answer. Is, well, why did you have the email server in the first place? And Hillary Clinton said, well, convenience. Obviously, this is not convenient. So what's the answer?
And everything she said in the March interview has been contradicted now. I never sent anything marked classified.
Right.
I was the only one. The State Department made copies. I turned over everything work-related. Yeah.
Yeah. Check is in the mail.
If you believe that, I have some cattle futures in Arkansas.
The check is in the mail. So now the big news, of course, Andrew, is that they're going to reboot the campaign.
What was this? Hillary 5.0?
Hillary 5.0. Have you read the plan for this? They're going to plan for her to be spontaneous and start.
I love it.
And start crafting some authenticity for her.
Attention! We will be doing an authentic rally tomorrow.
Spontaneously, be there. Don't be late.
Yeah, that's if she's getting into spontaneous, then she's bringing up echoes of Benghazi. So I don't know. That's dangerous.
Spontaneity, because it reminds me of the of what was attributed to Sam Goldwyn. I don't know if he actually said it or not, but it sounds like Sam Goldwyn when he said, what was it? Sincerity is the key. Once you fake that, you can do anything.
No, that was Groucho Marx.
Oh, was it Groucho Marx? Okay, yeah.
Sincerity is the key human trait. If you can fake that well, you've got it made.
There you go.
and Samuel Goldwyn's, my favorite quote of his was trying to explain why his latest blockbuster was a flop. And he said, well, if they don't want to come, you can't stop them.
They stay away in droves. I said. But I mean, we're going through and people are scratching their heads. I wonder why Hillary's not gaining traction. I wonder why she's losing ground. I mean, this isn't
rocket science.
It's not rocket science. She is not a terribly likable politician. And the only thing that she would have going for her would be, sort of an uber competence sort of thing, which she has never demonstrated. And by the way, her 4 years at State Department amply demonstrate otherwise. But I mean, this email stuff.
She's a terrible candidate too.
Terrible candidate. Terrible and on the stump, probably not horrible, not too bad. I mean, but if you start asking her any kinds of questions, the thing about authenticity is this. What you saw in the March presser was the authentic Hillary. What you saw when Ed Henry was peppering her with questions outside of the thing in Las Vegas, that's the authentic Hillary. She feels
she's authentic.
She feels entitled. She won't. She condescends. She's sarcastic. She thinks everybody else around her is dumber than she is, and that's the authentic Hillary. And the problem is that authenticity sounds great unless you're just an unlikable person, and then authenticity is really a bad thing.
Yeah. When people talk about how Ronald Reagan had handlers and that's why he was so good and so on, no, I'm sorry. If Adolf Hitler had professional handlers, he'd still be Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
If you don't have a good personable client, you can't make them likable, because people read people. There's little ticks. There's dodging of the eyes. There's hand movements, head down. And if you watch Hillary's body language, whether it's March or with Ed Henry, it just screams one, pain, and two, I'm not telling the truth, but I want to get this over with. So people figure it out. Now, whether they figure it out in time or not, they didn't by 2012, but Americans can figure it out, and my theory is they figure it out somewhat faster on TV, although it's easier, or social media, although it's easier to distort on a visual medium and to fudge things. It's not, in the end, it's easier to tell who's BSing.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, I think, yeah, and the thing is that there's two factors in play in modern presidential politics that maybe weren't in play when a guy like Richard Nixon was running, right? Yeah. And I want to go back to Nixon in a minute because there was something interesting I saw today about this. But one is that, and you and I have talked about this a number of times before, the presidential campaign is a lot longer than it used to be.
Oh, boy.
And the second thing is that there's no such thing as a local speech anymore. People see presidential candidates every day. They're listening to them every day because everything is, televised and streamed on the internet, and you can get practically anything this person is saying at any time. So there's not much of an opportunity for somebody to, fudge around a policy in one region of the country and then do something, different in another part of the country. So people get a much clearer sense of who these people are. And, 43 years ago or 46 years or 47 years ago, when Nixon was running for president in 68 and, well, in 60 for that matter, too, you'd see a speech and you might get a clip of it on the nightly news. But otherwise, if you wanted to see a full speech from a presidential candidate, you had to go to the event. He had to go out there, and he had to be around. He or she had to be around wherever you were at. So if you're in, say, I don't know, Tennessee, or you're in Utah, two states where presidential campaigns don't usually spend a lot of time, right, you might never see or hear a presidential candidate speech until the conventions, which were typically televised. And even then, we're not necessarily run 24/7. You might just see the primetime speech of the nominee, and that was it.
And the TV, the first convention televised I watched with my dad was 52 with Eisenhower. TV, for better or worse, TV has changed the kinds of candidates we get, and it's changed the candidates' behavior. I mean, for instance, John Edwards, pretty boy, nice hair, fixing it all up and so on. He would not have survived in the days previous to that, where, as you point out, well, of course, there was radio in the interim, but I've got a CD of the first presidential and candidate speeches recorded, which are back in the first few years of the 20th century. Teddy Roosevelt, whose voice was actually kind of squeaky, and this was a shock to me. I thought he looks like this big booming orator, and he was an excellent orator. But if you listen to the language, it's these long, flowing, grandiloquent sentences with clauses, and this was the entertainment of the day, and only the people who were close enough to him to hear could hear it.
Right.
So people had to follow it. They had to be paying attention. Imagine the Lincoln-Douglas debates, right? There were, 8 hours, for God's sake, or something like that? It just went on and on. And people had a longer attention span, and they had, apparently, the auditory ability to hear and understand more complicated sentences than we do today. Now, the sound bites on television, not originally, but 20, 25 years ago, were 20, 22, 23 seconds long. Now they're 8 seconds. Now, God's gift to America was C-SPAN, and you can often go there and hear the whole thing now, as you point out.
Yep.
And not only that, but right next to it is a transcript. I mean, this is just so so wonderful. As a reporter who started out and all I had was a notebook, folks. You didn't even have tape recorders. I had hand tape recorders in those days. So, yeah, things have improved technically, but it's also shaped the candidates, and you can get some candidates who are superficial, but it looks great, sounds cool. I would put the current incumbent in that category, and playing on America's emotions to elect its first black president in 07 and 08, and there really wasn't anything that was going to stop that. And then the Wall Street crisis sort of guaranteed it. But that's why, once again, we come back to what I'm always saying, is that you've got to be an intelligent news consumer, and you've got to have a variety of sources. One of them, like Hot Air or whatever, will have, if not the whole tape, links to the whole tape, links to the, when you write about a poll, there's a lot of places that I used to think were first rate, but they don't have links to the poll because they don't want to send people away from their site. So they'll have a poll, and you got to take their word for it. Well, I'm sorry, I don't take the word for it. I want to see the original documents. And
I think that's absolutely fair. It's all of this is part of the struggle, you might want to say, for politicians to be consistently authentic, to use the term here for Hillary. But I mean, when you're when you're leaking this story to the New York Times and the Washington Post, I mean, Andrea Tantaros wrote this first on Twitter. I'm going to give her full credit for this because it's a hilarious point, but nothing screams spontaneous and authentic like having a campaign strategy to start sounding more spontaneous and authentic and leak it in advance to the New York Times and the Washington Post. I mean, at a certain point, David Axelrod, right? How many times have you heard me quote David Axelrod approvingly, Andrew?
Yeah, I don't remember any.
Yeah, I don't think you would remember any. But David Axelrod said it's like something from The Onion. I mean, he put that on Twitter. It's like something from The Onion. You don't announce it, you just do it. Mark Halperin is on Morning Joe.
And it's so klutzy.
Yeah.
You allow people to think that they figured it out themselves, even though you led them inevitably to your conclusion.
Right. I mean, come on. We're not children. We know that all campaigns are packaged to some extent. But I mean, that's just sad.
The governor I worked for in Montana was authentic to a fault, and I mean, I'm no great political strategist or genius, but what I figured out was the best thing to do was to let the world see him themselves, and so we set up a whole series, an ongoing series of opportunities for Montanans to see this governor in an amazing array of situations. And I told them, we got no special plans here, just be yourself. And that made him comfortable, and himself was so imminently likable. He got reelected with 80%, because his instinct for children. You can have kids as props, and you see politicians. The difference between how Joe Biden holds a baby and how Obama holds a baby, it just screams phony Obama, genuine Biden. I'm sorry, it just does if you look at it. And so this guy that I worked for, I said, well, Halloween, and he said, oh yeah, we dress up at our house. I said, well, great, why don't we, So we set it up so that starting at 5 o'clock until 8:30 on Halloween night, the governor would be handing out treats at the mansion, and all the kids could come. And I suggested in the news releases that parents bring their cameras, and I tried to turn it into like a visit to Santa Claus, so you'd have this year with the governor in his costume, and next year, and you'd have him on the refrigerators and stuff like that. And we made it a mystery. Nobody, including myself, nobody knew what his costume was going to be until he came out the door at 5 o'clock. And we ended up with TV crews there for live coverage of what the governor's costume is. Now, if you think about it, who cares?
Right.
What the governor's costume is? But it was authentic, and it was really him. And he didn't come out looking all stilted and uncomfortable, dressed up as, I don't even remember what he was. But I know he was. Wouldn't have been my choice. He was the Cowardly Lion one year.
It's kind of cute and clever, and it works with kids. They grew up.
Yeah, it does. And we ended up with like 4,000 or 5,000 kids in Montana. That's a lot of kids in one place, coming through in line every time. So you're right, and even Axelrod is right. I used to compete against him in Chicago, but it's not, authenticity is not something that you can fake.
Right. Exactly. If you're faking it, it ain't authentic. And if you are saying our campaign is going to have a spontaneous moment tomorrow at 3 p.m., please,
I know. Hillary Clinton is going to have a flash mob.
There's a little trouble. There's a little trouble with terms here, I think. Look, I mean, the problem for Hillary is just that she's not a very good candidate, and I mean, Democrats knew this in 2008, and yet nobody is jumping in. And now we hear that people are starting to talk to Michael Bloomberg about getting in the race. Did you see this? Jazz wrote about it earlier today. Apparently, he's the anti-Trump. Now,
I see. Another rich guy.
Yeah, my comment on that was, I for one welcome our new oligarchic overlords, but
Oh, geez, that's amazing. Well, to be honest, during the 07-08 campaign, Hillary, her staff was klutzy sometimes, but when she got in a competitive situation with Obama, I thought she was pretty tough. Shame on you, Barack Obama. And I remember she came out, she did a gate greeting of workers going to work in Toledo at dawn in the dark in Toledo, Ohio. And then she did a news availability in the parking lot or the garage there. And that's when she said that famous line that I thought was so telling. John McCain has a lifetime of service to this country. Barack Obama has a speech from 2002.
Right. Yep.
And now there's a little story behind that, and that is that Hillary Clinton and John McCain are really good friends, as close friends, I guess, as politicians can have. But if you look through the photo files, there's a lot of pictures of them smiling and laughing. They were on the Armed Services Committee together in the Senate. And when she first arrived on the floor of the Senate, what was that? That's 2000.
2001?
Yeah. She was getting a cold shoulder from a lot of people. And McCain just marched right up and introduced himself and welcomed her and showed her all around. And they became buddies. In fact, I heard stories about them on Armed Services Committee trips, having drinking contests, vodka drinking contests in Lithuania, and she drinking McCain under the table that night. So they became good friends. And if you look at what she was saying in 08, she wasn't crapping on McCain. Now, if she'd gotten into the general election, I'm sure she would have to. But during the primary season, she was holding her punches on McCain, and I thought she was pretty tough with Obama. And of course, her ops people got Jeremiah Wright videos out, the racist sermons and so on. So, and that helped, but obviously it wasn't enough.
Obviously not enough. All right, so what other stories are you following, Andrew? I know that...
Well, I did a thing today on Joe Biden. I did my column today examining...
Biden Watch.
Biden Watch, yeah, right. And just sort of questioning, is this guy a genuine contender or just a geezer? And he's as I said, he may be genuine in his public anguish over whether or not to run, but it's exactly what politicians do if they want to string the suspense and the media interest out, which is to toss in little tidbits or have your staff leak some stuff about what you're doing. Yes, he's in now, probably, and then, oh, well, no, he's not. So I said in the column that once you get the bug for the Oval Office, and of course Biden has tried 2 times with spectacular unsuccess in the past, once you get the bug, it's like the hidden legacy of measles. The shingles virus inhabits your system, and there's no telling when it might break out. So the media will help him because they want a horse race story. They want to be able to. That's what they need. They need conflict. But my God, the guy would be 4 years older than Reagan was, and Reagan is the oldest at 69.
Yeah.
To take the oath. And Biden is 5 years older than Hillary. And I'm sympathetic to the guy's losses. He lost his wife, he lost his daughter, he lost his son, and no parent should have to go through what he did last May. It's terrible, but running for president is a voluntary job. Nobody makes you run. So I said, let's just keep the violins in their case here, and let's deal with this guy. Without Hillary's troubles, he'd be hopeless. But because of Hillary's troubles, and they're looking for an alternative, he can look attractive now. Now his poll numbers have gone up, but he'd start taking hits the minute he says he's a candidate. The average age for becoming president, taking the oath the first time, is just under 55.
Yeah.
Hillary would be 69, Biden 73, about to turn 74.
Bernie Sanders about the same age. Bernie Sanders is about the same age. Elizabeth Warren would be 69.
He's a little bit older. And boy, what a debate stage contrast. You have Biden come on the stage without a walker, and then you've got some Republican contenders. The major ones average right around 50.
Yeah.
And, of course, Rubio is, 43, I think.
So's Cruz. I think Cruz is 43 as well, or 42, and Walker's 47. And, yeah, I mean, those guys are young. By the way, did I mention this to you before? I mean, Republicans have nominated some older people. Usually, Republicans tend to be a little older than Democrats. If you take a look at the nominees, the party nominees. And, of course, Reagan was the oldest, 69, as you mentioned. But nobody except for Martin O'Malley in the current Democratic field. Well, I take that back. Chafee would also be younger than this, but nobody's talking about Lincoln Chafee these days.
Well, yeah, let's talk about realistic.
Yeah, right. But all of them except Martin O'Malley would be the oldest Democratic Party nominee since. Who do you think the oldest non-incumbent, I should say, the oldest non-incumbent Democratic Party nominee since? Take a guess, take a stab at it.
Well, Roosevelt, right?
No. When he first ran, he was younger.
Oh, first ran, yeah.
Non-incumbent, okay. Oldest non-incumbent nominee.
Yeah. Who?
Lewis Cass.
Uh-huh.
From 1848. He was 66 years old. I actually had to look this up, right? Because I was thinking, well, who was the oldest? And I was thinking maybe it was, Woodrow Wilson or somebody else, because I couldn't think of anybody recently. I wasn't sure that what Stevenson's age was, but I was pretty sure it wasn't 66 years old. And no, it's Lewis Cass in 1848, ran against Zachary Taylor. It was a hell of a campaign, too.
Yeah, and then Zach didn't last too long, but and that's how we got Millard. But I think Zachary was 17 months, I think he was in. And you know how he got elected was he didn't tell anybody what his views were.
Yeah. It helps.
Do interviews. He didn't talk to it. That was beneath him to talk to voters. You're on your own, folks. And so people read into him, like I think they did with Obama in a way. People read into him what they wanted to read into him, and he got elected. I did a column about last week about which American presidents had never held an elective office before, and there's 5 of them.
Eisenhower's got to be one of them.
Yeah, if you don't count George Washington, because there wasn't an
right.
office
Yeah,
before.
right. Yeah.
There were 5, and it was Eisenhower, Hoover.
Interesting. That's right. He was a bureaucrat. He wasn't He was an appointee. Yeah, he wasn't an elected official.
Yeah. And that's the last time, Hoover in 1928, that's the last time that a cabinet secretary has been elected.
Oh.
And Polk was the last cabinet secretary, was the last Secretary of State to be elected.
So you got Polk, you've got Hoover, you've got Eisenhower, you've got Zachary Taylor, I assume, because he was a general before he was
Polk,
president.
I don't think it was Polk, was it? I'm trying to remember. I can't remember now. Let's see. I can look it up while we're talking here. There were 5.
Wilson, right? Or Wilson was a governor, right?
Yeah, Wilson was a governor. Yeah,
That's
see,
right.
I thought I had forgotten about the governor part of it. And Hoover was the first Quaker.
And of course, Nixon was the second one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? And there was a wonderful story about Richard Nixon when he was courting Pat. He was very romantic, and when he would call her, I guess in Quaker, when you call someone thee, that's a term of endearment, like honey or whatever. So he would call her thee and thou, and he hid a basket of flowers with the ring in it on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, and he lured her there on a date, and then got down on his knees on the beach and proposed. I just, I mean, it's another side of
Nixon, of a very complicated guy.
Another side of Nixon that you can't. That you can't make up. I just love stuff like that.
Well, Andrew, we're just about coming to the end here, so we're going to have to get the jokes. I mean, it just flies. Time flies on this thing.
Yeah, boy, I'll tell you. Well, Jimmy Fallon said that Jeb Bush the other day attacked Donald Trump in both Spanish and English. Later, Donald Trump responded in both English and much, much louder English.
Huge. It was luxurious English, though. It was really luxurious English. Yeah.
Jimmy Fallon also said that President Obama will appear, and I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name, Bear Grylls? Is that his name?
Yeah, I guess. Bear Grylls, I guess? Yeah. I'm not sure, yeah.
Grylls, yeah. President Obama will appear on an episode of Running Wild with Bear Grylls later this year. The episode features Obama roughing it on a golf course that hasn't been mowed in 2 days.
Oh, my gosh! Oh, man, the humanity. Okay.
Yeah, right. And let's see, one other one. The judge, this was Fallon again, a federal judge tossed out Tom Brady's 4-game suspension in the Deflate case scandal. The judge said, after careful consideration of evidence, I rule in favor of my fantasy football team.
I knew it! I knew it!
There had to be a ringer in there somewhere.
There had to be something, yeah.
I will find that story, and I will email you so you can give it to the rest of the folks here after I sign off. Who the 5 were.
I think we've got that. My cousin Mike, TR4A, in the chat room says it's Taylor, Zachary Taylor, Grant, Ulysses Grant, should have known that, Taft, Hoover, and Eisenhower.
Right, and Taft is the only one who was the head of both the executive and the judicial branches.
Yeah, the only one who's served as both president and Supreme Court
and he was also
Chief Justice.
The most plus-size president in history, 340 big ones. He could be an NFL lineman if he could move. There was a story about him needing some aids one time. He got stuck in the White House bathtub. and they the next day they ordered a larger bathtub.
That will be the result of those things. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
all right, buddy. We'll talk next week.
All right, Andrew Malcolm, of course, the prince of Twitter at @AHMalcolm, also at investors.com / Andrew Malcolm, where he opines on a regular basis. Also the home, investors.com, of Michael Ramirez, and lots of great editorial content. Michael's got a book coming out, by the way, the end of October. He does. He's got a new collection coming out. I just put it on pre-order, so we'll have to get Michael on here at some point and talk about his book.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, sir. Well, you have yourself a great week, and we will talk to you again on Tuesday next.
Okay. Take care, everybody. Thanks.
Take care, sir. Andrew Malcolm of Investors Business Daily, the prince of Twitter, has been my guest, and now we're going to go ahead and talk to Andy Parrish, and we're going to go ahead and try to get Andy on the phone right now. And I'm just waiting for the call to connect here. We'll switch over to the video view. Hopefully this is going to come up pretty quick. There we go. Fausta from faustasblog.com describes Taft as portly, which I think is probably not an ungracious.
You've reached Andy Parrish with LifeSite News. I'm sorry I missed your call. Please.
Let's not upgrade the Skype stuff. Let's see. We'll try this again in just a second. I think part of the problem here is that we didn't list each other as contacts, although it did let me call. We'll try it again in just a second. Well, that sounds a little more promising. There we go. Andy Parrish is on the line. Let me go ahead and flip over to the video view. Andy, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine, Ed. How about you?
I'm doing good. I'm hoping that you're not driving while you're doing this.
No. I'm parked. I had a meeting this afternoon, and then I parked just waiting for your call here.
Okay, because, safety first, Andy.
Absolutely.
You and I are on the same roads, right? Are you still in Minnesota?
I am. I'm in Belle Plaine, believe it or not.
Belle Plaine, yeah. Well, we're not quite on the same roads, but, safety first. Safety first. That's
right.
what I say. Well, great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And now you're, I think when we first met, you were working for Michelle Bachmann.
Right, yep. I served as her campaign manager a couple of times and as her chief of staff out on Capitol Hill for a while, so that was a good experience for me, yep.
Yep, and now you are working for LifeSite News. John Henry Weston and the folks over there, Dustin Segan's my good friend and occasional contributor over at hotair.com.
Yep.
Yeah, so how's life at LifeSite News?
It's great. We're a great organization that we reach about 50 million people a year now through our website, and we report on the truth when it comes to life and family issues, and we do some investigative stuff into Planned Parenthood and the atrocities that they commit on a daily basis, and we really get to reach people with the truth, which so many people I think are eager for.
Well, I think you're right about that. I think people are very eager for the truth, and of course there's been a lot been coming out about Planned Parenthood, and including something surprising about our own state. And I have to tell you, Andy, this is a nice piece of work by LifeSite News to catch this, because I was not aware of the fact that it is actually against the law in Minnesota to donate fetal tissue, fetal
That's
organs. Even with full consent and even with full informed consent, it's just strictly illegal. You can't do it here in Minnesota.
Yep, that's correct. That's been a law in the books for quite some time where you have to provide a dignified disposal either through burial or cremation of an aborted or miscarried child. As long as it has cartilage to it, you cannot donate it at all. And
not only that, but the same law also states that the only tests that can be conducted on the remains of a fetus are either to establish paternity or or as part of a criminal investigation for very obvious reasons. You want the police to be able to do that, but that's it. Those are the only two conditions in which you can conduct tests. Excuse me. There is a third condition. I take that back. The third condition is to check for fertility of the mother.
Correct.
To see if there's a consequence of fertility for the mother. But that's it. Those are the three conditions. And so those are explicitly listed as the only conditions under which testing can occur. So that, of course, makes it interesting, because that previous Planned Parenthood video that came out, ABR, and I can't remember what ABR stands for at the moment.
Advanced Bioscience Resources.
Thank you. That's what it is.
Yep.
They are a not-for-profit company, as opposed to their competitor STEM Express, which is expressly a for-profit company. They are a not-for-profit company. ABR is has offices, has incorporated itself in Minnesota.
And not just Minnesota, Ed, 4 miles from Planned Parenthood St. Paul, where they provide surgical abortions.
What a coincidence. I'm sure that this is just a coincidence, Andy.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, why? I mean, sure. I mean, of all the places to locate, why 4 miles from Planned Parenthood, Minnesota? I mean, but, they say, Ed, that they don't participate in this, Planned Parenthood, Minnesota. And I say, if you can't trust an abortionist, who can you trust?
Doggone it. You're absolutely right, Andy.
Right.
Case is settled. So how about the twins this year?
Yeah, there you go.
No, wait a minute.
There's more to the story, Ed, is that there's a young lady who I found through LinkedIn and some other places who lists her former job as procurement specialist for Advanced Biosciences Resources, located 4 miles from Planned Parenthood, Minnesota. What's she procuring?
That would be a good question. Probably just office supplies. I'm just guessing.
You're right. Probably.
You know what? What I found interesting about this. First off, I found it shocking that Planned Parenthood lied. Not terribly, but what I did find interesting about this is that and I know that Minnesota is a fairly liberal state, and not only is it a fairly liberal state, but there is an awful lot of medical research that goes on here. You've got the Mayo Clinic down in Rochester, and other satellite locations as well. You've got the University of Minnesota, which does a lot of research. You have medical device companies out here this is a huge area for medical device companies and that sort of thing. And I mean, we don't necessarily like it, but there is a lot of political support for abortion rights here in Minnesota. You and I both know this. We live in the state. We're not ignorant of this. And yet this law is on the books, and it's been on the books for a while. And I'm just wondering if anybody realized it was on the books. When you started following up on this, were people surprised that this law existed?
They were. They very much were, because of how much research we do here. But, I remember the bill when I did my time in the legislature as a staff assistant, or as a legislative assistant down in St. Paul. I remember this coming up and being an issue. And I just happened to remember that. When I saw the video and I heard Minnesota, I just thought that can't be right. We don't allow that here in Minnesota. But we still have that law in the books. It wouldn't surprise me if Dayton tried to repeal it. Like he has, tried to wreck the state so much in every other way.
Well, true.
We have a lot of medical research here, but look at all the jobs we just lost from Medtronic and others. I mean, people are leaving just because of how liberal the state is. But surprisingly, Ed, you'll find in the Minnesota Senate, you'll find a lot of pro-life Democrats. Those rural Democrats out in Congressional District 7, up in the Iron Range. The more rural you get down south in Congressional District 1, you'll find that those Democrats are pro-life. And so this bill is a reasonable bill saying that you have to provide a dignified burial or a dignified cremation. Isn't that shocking to me the more I think about it?
I don't think it's a shocking law. I mean, in and of itself, I think it's a pretty good law. I was a little surprised to see that Minnesota had it. And you mentioned repeal, but the state legislature is in control of the Republicans. They're not going to be pushing through any repeal anytime. Oh, excuse me, the lower house of the state legislature, I should say. The Democrats still control the upper house. They are not going to be pushing through a repeal of this anytime soon. No, certainly not under these circumstances. I mean, they're not going to. The Republicans in the lower house are not going to bend over backwards to sort of retroactively validate whatever ABR and Planned Parenthood may be doing. So the other question that I have, Andy, because you're a research-driven guy, you're a guy who likes to get the facts on the ground, is let's say ABR is not working with Planned Parenthood, even though they're only 4 miles away, even though it's obviously the partner that of choice in this area. How many other clinics are there for them to partner with?
There's one in Duluth. There's a women's center in Duluth that'll do surgical abortions. There's one down by the U of M, but the U of M has said that they have nothing to do with fetal tissue procurement or sales or donations. And then there's Meadowbrook, which is in Minneapolis. So there aren't very many locations close enough or conducive enough for them to be procuring tissue from.
Well, I mean, and let's face it, I don't know how many locations Planned Parenthood has in Minnesota. I would imagine that they have more than one. And if you're going to set up a shop out here, if ABR is going to go through the expense of, paying for leasing, paying for employees to be out here, and they've been doing it for 6 years now on a non-profit basis, Andy, I mean, you'd have to expect that I know they're not for profit, but at least the revenue side of this and the material side of this has to justify their continued existence here. So they're obviously working with somebody out here.
Somebody is giving them. It'd be one thing if they specialized in other stuff, but they don't. They're the nation's largest and oldest fetal procurement company. And it's odd that they're in a state that doesn't allow fetal procurement, number one. And like I said, they're 4 miles away from Planned Parenthood, number two. And so I think it's very concerning. And when we presented these facts to Speaker Doubt called for an investigation into Planned Parenthood by Mark Dayton. And of course, with Tina Flint Smith, who used to be the vice president of Minnesota Planned Parenthood, it's not likely to happen.
Well, I mean, this is a question here. This is a law enforcement situation, is it not? Yep. I mean, Dayton doesn't have to approve an investigation at this point. Actually, the state legislature has at least some authority to probe this on their own. But if it's a law, and if somebody's breaking the law, well, the police or the district attorney or the attorney general should be taking a look at that, right?
Yeah, it's Ramsey County Attorney. I think his name is John Chow, and Kathy Lomer, a state representative from Washington County, has called on that prosecutor to look into it and to criminally charge people if they're breaking the law.
I don't know much about John Chow. I think who was his predecessor at Ramsey County?
Was it
Ramstad?
What's that?
Was it Ramstad, or am I thinking of the?
No. I think it was Gartner was her name. She was the county attorney.
Yeah, I don't know much about John Chow, but I mean, laws are on the books. It's their job to enforce it, whether they particularly back that law or not. It's still their job to enforce it. So, yeah, I mean, shouldn't somebody be looking into this, especially when you have evidence that the organization itself, ABR I'm talking about, is openly telling people that they're doing this type of business?
Yeah, you have the organization itself saying that they have clinics where they get tissue in Minnesota. In Minnesota, it's illegal to get tissue or fetal tissue. They have an office 4 miles away, Ed, and there's a young lady who used to work for them whose job.
Did we just lose Andy? Andy, are you still there? It looks like we might be having a slight connection problem here. I think they're going to try. For some reason, Skype is having some. It tells me it's on hold. Okay, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that. I said hopefully we find out what is happening, and hopefully we find out the truth about who's selling baby parts here in Minnesota.
Well, Andy, I mean, Speaker Doubt I think is going to stay on this. I would imagine he's going to be okay. And are you hearing from anybody else? Are you hearing from Democrats who want to see an investigation on this?
No, but I've heard from State Representative Matt Dean, State Representative Mary Franzen, State Representative Kathy Lomer. They all want to see an investigation, and Kurt Doubt wants to see an investigation as well. So I think we're going to see one. But you're right. This is a criminal matter. Legislature makes laws when people break the.
Yeah, the executive branch is responsible for picking up the slack and enforcing it. I think we're just having. Okay, there we go. You're back.
We need to see where we're at. If they're going to charge these people criminally or not, or if they're procuring tissue or what they're doing.
Yeah, I don't think they're there to open a library. Would be my guess.
No,
would be my guess. All right. So, what do you hear? I was actually kind of expecting to hear something today about a new video coming out, just because it's a Tuesday and it seems that that's the pattern. Have you heard anything about when the next video is coming out?
I have not, but it would make sense for it to come out tomorrow. We had the holiday on Monday. I think they'll get it out tomorrow.
Yeah, so I guess we'll just keep our eyes and ears peeled. Quickly, I don't know if you're even interested in the topic, but I know that John Henry Western talked about it. The Pope's remarks. Did you catch any of the media coverage on this?
I have not yet. I have not caught any of that, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that.
Oh, okay. Well, John Henry commented on it. We picked up the statement and put it in our post. Interesting. Just I think that the media just didn't understand enough about the issue to report on it accurately. But there were some media outlets like Crux, for instance, that does that type of work really well. LifeSite News, which was John Henry was actually there with me for the Extraordinary Synod when all these topics began being discussed, and so got to look for the outlets that are following this and understand the issues involved, and that would include lifesitenews.com. It's .com, right? It's not .org, right?
.com, right?
.com. Lifesitenews.com. And Andy's doing some great work out there for them and following up on this story. And Andy, I'm just hoping that you're going to keep us up to date on it as it unfolds.
I will, Ed. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much for being on, sir.
All right. Take care.
Take care. All right. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next guest. And our next guest, actually, I talked to him earlier today. Representative Reid Ribble of Wisconsin represents 11 counties in northeastern Wisconsin, which includes Green Bay, Door County. If you've been to Door County, it's kind of a fun place to go visit. In fact, we mentioned it during the course of the interview. Representative Ribble criticized pretty harshly, criticized Donald Trump for some of the remarks that he's been making. This was late last week, got picked up in the newspapers, went out on Twitter, all that sort of thing. So I reached out to Representative Ribble to talk about that. But we also talk about Planned Parenthood, defunding, the intricacies, of defunding, what might cause a government shutdown, and it's not Planned Parenthood in Ribble's estimation, but something else, and much more. So stay tuned. Here is Representative Reid Ribble talking about what's going on. Joining us on the phone now is Representative Reid Ribble of Wisconsin. Congressman Ribble, it is great to talk to you, and welcome to the Ed Morrissey Show for the very first time.
Ed, it's good to be with you. Thanks for giving me a show.
Well, now I'm first off, I'm interested in what your perspective is, because you're a fellow Upper Midwesterner. You represent the Green Bay area of Wisconsin, which is going to be an important part of, I think, of the next election.
Sure.
And I think you're going to have your finger on the pulse there, I think, of what's going to be a bellwether county. But before we get to that, you took on a Titan last week and got a little tired of the Donald Trump phenomenon last week and spoke out against Donald Trump. That was end of last week, and this is my first opportunity to talk to you about that. Tell us what frustrated you about the Donald Trump phenomenon.
There are two things that frustrates me, and I think at some point conservatives have to start judging Trump's record. Is he really a conservative? And when are we allowed to start doing that? It seems like anybody that challenges Trump, right away, they just come out and attack. They don't really ever answer the question; they just attack. And I do think that we have a right to challenge his record. He's been relatively pro-choice, pro-Democrat, and I mean, just today, Paul Krugman came out, the most liberal economist in the country, saying that Trumponomics is where he wants to go, that's the right thing to do. And that should tell you just about everything. And then second to that is the very things that we teach our children in how to talk to each other, that you don't call people names. When I sent my boys to kindergarten that first time, I told them you don't throw sand at people, you don't yell at them, you don't call them names, you show them respect, you turn the other cheek. The things that we try to teach people to be upright citizens in this country just seems to have gone by the wayside when it comes to political discourse. And we would not accept any of this in any other human endeavor, this type of language in any human endeavor but politics. And I reject it.
It is kind of a curious thing. I mean, this is even for, politics in the United States, especially presidential politics, has a long and colorful history of of epithets going all the way back to the first really contested election of 1800, where
Sure.
I think it was Jefferson who accused Adams of being hermaphroditic at
yeah.
one point.
Yeah, Adams and Jefferson. It was pretty ugly.
It got ugly, and people often bring this up, Congressman, when we start talking about how nasty political campaigns go. Well, the election of 1800, and I say, yeah, as a guy who's interested in history, I get that, but is that the standard that we want to apply? I mean,
well, of course, and I would think that mankind would be a little bit more enlightened today. There's a lot of things that went on in 1800 that we wouldn't accept today.
True.
And so the idea is just say, well, because it's part of history that we should continue to do it. But I mean, these are just some of the words that Mr. Trump has used: loser, weird, dummy, bimbo, low-class snob, clown, buffoon. I mean, this is the language of schoolyard children.
Right.
And we've got, this nation has massive, massive challenges: foreign policy challenges, economic challenges, debt challenges, and we really need a thoughtful discourse on how we're going to solve them. And you can't start a thoughtful discourse when you start from this type of language. And so I'm trying to, I have tried now for 5 years to get people to put down their swords and start talking to each other so that we can find out what things we have in common and what we can agree on very, very difficult choices facing this country to move forward. Now, the one thing I have found interesting, and you can go read my Twitter feed if you wish, but I've been accused of not fighting, and people love Trump because he's a fighter. Well, but now all of a sudden when I fight back, they don't like me so much. And so the fact of the matter is you can't have it both ways.
It's a good point. I mean, we certainly have seen that when people are trying to dissect Trump's positions or his past, they say, well, he's a fighter, and if you disagree with him, then all of a sudden you're a bad guy for apparently at least engaging on the politics. It's not an unknown phenomenon. Congressman Ribble, welcome to the club, in other words. Look, I mean, I remember when Harry Reid called George Bush a loser. I mean, I don't think you were in Congress at that time, Congressman.
Oh yeah, no, I was not. I came in Congress in 2011.
That's what I recalled, and this would have been 2007, I think, when he called Bush a loser, and he also said that the war was lost. There's lots of things that Harry Reid has said that I thought have been pretty despicable, including a lot of the stuff that he says about the Koch brothers, whether or not you agree with their politics. But look, I mean, Republicans got enraged over that comment. That comment about Bush being a loser was widely panned, not just among Republicans either. So, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of curious as to why Trump gets a pass on that, and why Trump, for instance, gets a pass on some of the things that you've mentioned, the past support for, if not progressive policies, and certainly left-of-center policies, when you have people who are pointing out these somewhat more minor heterodoxies with some of the other candidates in the race.
Yeah, it's fascinating, but I do think that Trump is kind of really grabbed onto this wave of discontent with a portion of primary voters out there, and that discontent is founded in some reality. And I think
agree.
We shouldn't dismiss that either. We have to be aware of that. I came into Congress in 2011. The national debt was about $15 trillion, maybe $14 trillion, and today it's $18 trillion. And to the degree that we've not been able to stop it in this divided government has got Republicans frustrated. First, they felt that the House alone could do it, and they found out that wasn't possible, and then they hoped the Senate could do it, and they really wanted Obamacare repealed. Just as an aside, I'm surprised on the language that they're okay with Trump repealing Obamacare and replacing it with a single-payer system to the left of Hillary, but they blame us for not repealing it at all. And you know what? The Congress had a 60-seat majority when it was passed. They had a majority in the House. The Senate had a 60-seat. The House had a majority, and they had the President of the White House. We've not had that dynamic since. And so, but now Trump is actually coming into the left of that. And at what point are we going to challenge that?
But I take your point, and I think that this is a distinction that is sometimes hard to make, is that you have people who want to criticize Trump and end up criticizing the voters who like Trump. And I don't think at this stage, Congressman Ribble, and you're probably going to be have a little bit more insight on this than I do. I don't think at this stage that there is anybody who's got there's not a significant amount of hard and fast commitment to any one particular presidential candidate. And Trump makes for a very easy vehicle to stick a thumb in the eye of the establishment, in part because they feel after 2 midterm victories for the Republican Party that nothing much has changed. And I mean, look, I've taken civics, so I understand how that works in Congress. Yeah. I mean, there's only so much you can do when the president is from the other party and is completely intransigent. And I get that. But I mean, I also understand the frustration that people are feeling and why they are latching on to Donald Trump. And so I guess the question would be, what can Congress do to address that anger so that when it comes down to the point in time where people are really going to start making choices in this race rather than just sort of letting their anger vent, what can Congress do to? Well,
I think there are some things that should have been done in the past and could be done still. Is for one thing, show the American people what the alternative is.
Right.
We can say we don't like Obamacare, but absent an alternative, it rings a little bit hollow. And so when the American people get frustrated by that, there are many of us here in the halls of Congress that share that frustration. I mean, if you're frustrated out in Wisconsin or Minnesota or wherever you are in the country, just imagine how frustrating it is for a guy like me who has to live in this environment day in and day out. It's very, very frustrating. The American people would like to see, well, what exactly does tax reform look like? What would Republicans do in relation to this thing? And it's okay if the president vetoes it or the Senate stops it. That should not prevent the House of Representatives or the Senate from acting their will and moving some policy position forward. Now, the rules of the Senate do make it more difficult. The House has repeatedly done things related to Obamacare in both trying to fix it and repeal it or reform it. All of them have been stopped at the U.S. Senate level. And so there's just so much you can do within the rules of the Senate. But really, the Congress should just do the best it can to meet up and live up to the obligations and promises that they've made in their political campaigns. And I think some of that frustration would go away. However, when we have tried and haven't been successful, it's in part been driven by the fact that we plain and simply did not have the necessary votes in the Senate and in the White House. But that doesn't mean we should not try to do better.
So we're coming back into session now. I'm assuming you're back in
I'm in D.C. I'm sitting at my desk right now.
You're in D.C. sitting at your desk. Coming back into session, of course, the first thing that's going to come up is the budget. You've got to get it done by September 30th, or at least pass a short-term CR to give yourselves a few more days. And that's typical. I mean, that's not terribly atypical for a budget process to have a CR in the last minute just to patch over a few days.
It's just unfortunate.
Right. Well, right, because the House has actually been putting together a budget. Where does this stand right now? Where do you see this going?
Well, right now, the House and Senate have a concurrent budget resolution. We actually came up with an agreement on the budget, and remember, the president really doesn't have much say in the budget. He doesn't get to vote on, doesn't get to veto the budget. The budget's the budget. The two chambers have agreed to a budget earlier this year, but Senate Democrats have prevented any appropriations or the bills that allow us to spend on these federal agencies. They've not allowed any of them to go forward, even though the House has already passed 7 of them. And the reason they've stopped it is because they want to have more spending. They want more discretionary spending. And the rules of the Senate allow them to block like that, just like Republicans blocked them when Reid was the majority leader. They're now in the minority. The Senate Democrats are blocking Republicans trying to move forward. So there will be some type of negotiated deal. But I can tell you for the majority of House Republicans, it will be a non-starter to break the budget caps. I just don't see that happening. And it'll be up to the Senate Democrats, because what they're saying is they're not going to fund Veterans Affairs, Veterans Benefits, they're not going to fund our active duty military. All those things have already been voted on with broad bipartisan support in the House of Representatives, and Senate Democrats have stopped it. They will ultimately have to make an answer for that.
Well, this is the reason why I wanted to talk to you, Representative Ribble, because that story hasn't really gotten out very much. I mean, we certainly have heard that there's been some foot dragging from Senate Democrats on the budget, but this is information that's out there. I mean, it's not a closely held secret. This isn't something that we're getting from Hillary Clinton's email server or anything else like that.
Right, and President Obama said that the Congress hasn't even passed a budget yet. He said that just a few weeks ago. Well, the fact of the matter is the Congress has passed a budget.
Right.
The first time since I've been in Congress they passed a budget and got agreement between the House and Senate on the numbers. And so then it's just a matter of appropriating the money, and Senate Democrats, like House Democrats, can offer up amendments that they wish to offer. And if they can get in the Senate 60 of their colleagues to agree, and we can get 218 of our colleagues to agree in the House, that becomes an amendment to that appropriations bill. But they've not even attempted it. They've not even tried in the Senate. Not a single appropriation bill has been allowed to come to the floor of the Senate as of today.
That's amazing.
That's why we're in this mess we're in.
That's amazing. It's amazing because, again, this is something that I know was a priority for Republican leadership because they wanted to demonstrate that the GOP was a governing party and that they could pass budgets. And apparently the GOP is trying to do what they can do, but they haven't been able to drag the Democrats along with them. Representative Ribble, let me ask you about the Planned Parenthood funding, because I know that that's going to be an issue here in the next week or so. There's a lot of pressure to cut off funding for Planned Parenthood. There's a couple of different nuances to that. There's Title X funding, which Congress appropriates and which Congress can not appropriate, or at least can put conditions on.
They can cut that funding, correct.
Yeah. You can't really do it so much on Medicaid. It's a little bit more complicated when it comes to Medicaid, because Medicaid is a patient choice sort of situation. But it's not that it's impossible, but it's tricky. And again, you'd have to get the Democrats to go along with this. What is the status of this? Is there going to be an attempt to strip Planned Parenthood of federal funds?
Sure, in the House for sure, and we'll do that, and we've done that in the past. And I have voted to strip funding for Planned Parenthood. And I think what the most likely scenario there is to take that money, the Title X money, and reappropriate it to community health clinics, so that women's health care, if you need to get a mammogram or some other type of care for women's health, they can get that care. They just won't be able to go through Planned Parenthood to get that care if they want the taxpayer to pay for it. And they can use their Obamacare health care plan, which, remember, we've been promised every single American is going to have health care.
Right.
They could go take their Obamacare health care plan to Planned Parenthood and pay for it that way if they wish. And but I do believe we'll stop it in the House, but the Senate's already tried to stop it, and we're unable to. Here's my big problem with it, is that even if we stop the funding, we don't necessarily stop the behavior.
Right.
And I believe that the Republicans in the House and Senate ought to act under the law and change the law to make sure that the behavior must end, not just the funding. It needs to be both. Because if we find what those videos reprehensible, which we do, if we find that behavior reprehensible, which we do, then we must pass legislation to prevent the behavior from occurring. And to me, that seems like a much better strategy than necessarily just trying to defund a portion of the money. As you correctly say, the piece that's within Medicaid is mandatory spending, and you're not likely to get at it.
Right, right. And that's a nuance I think that people fail to understand about entitlement spending, is that it comes from statute and it's actually not appropriated on a year-to-year basis, which is the reason why Congress doesn't have a tremendous amount of control over it. You have to change the statutes, and that's even trickier than trying to get appropriations through this particular Congress.
You never get the president to sign that.
Right, yeah, exactly. You know. So do you foresee a shutdown over this issue? Do you foresee it coming down to that, or do you think that Republicans...
I think there's more likely to be a shutdown over the cap than there is over Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, that's a good point. So,
but it would not surprise me to see a shutdown this year, because Senate Democrats have said they're not going to allow any appropriation bills to go forward that don't break the caps, that don't spend more money. They apparently haven't gotten the memo that we're $18.2 trillion in debt.
Exactly. All right, so Congressman Ribble, we've just got a couple of minutes left, and I'd like to just find out about voters in your constituency, the east of Wisconsin, Green Bay area, Brown County area. Tell us a little bit about voters out there, and what are they telling you?
I've just spent a month in the district, and it's been great being back with folks, and you're hearing a lot. Now, I do live in a predominantly Catholic and Lutheran district. I would kind of describe the typical voter up there as a Reagan Democrat, pro-life American who likes to go deer hunting. That's the voter that's up there. And so they're bothered by the Planned Parenthood issue. They're bothered by the abortion issue because they're mostly pro-life up there. However, they're very, very pragmatic, and so they want things to get done. And the message that I got loud and clear when I was back home is you guys need to get something done. The Trump phenomenon is in part because the American people are unaware or you are not doing what you guys said you were going to do, and so we want you to get some work done. Find the places where you can find agreement and do that. And that's what I've been hearing at home.
And so again,
and I live in a for those who are listening from outside of Wisconsin, I'm kind of in the swingiest district of the districts in Wisconsin.
Oh, is that right? Okay, so yeah I mean, Brown County is interesting. It's an interesting. I mean, I don't know how much of Brown County is in your district.
All of it.
All of Brown County.
All of it. I've got the northeast quadrant, 11 counties in northeast Wisconsin.
Got it.
The two largest cities are Green Bay and Appleton.
Door counties in your
Oh
district?
yeah, all of Door counties in my district.
Yeah, that's by the way, a wonderful place to visit. If people haven't seen it, it's a lovely place to visit. I've been there a couple of times. It's absolutely gorgeous up there. But yeah, I mean, this is interesting because this is the type of thing when you hear that frustration, I actually really think that it's born out of a how should I say it? A sense that the Republican victory in 2014 has not yet paid off for people who wanted to see real change. Now, when you're dealing with a hostile, a opposition party president, sometimes the only thing you can do is just stop things from happening.
Yeah, and that's correct, and that's a really astute statement you just made, because stopping things often doesn't get seen, because what doesn't happen isn't known.
Right.
Now, it's known to those of us who've been working in the policy and doing the necessary blocking and tackling that politics revolves around. We have to do those things, and so often voters are unaware of what didn't happen that could have happened if there was a different majority. Let's face it, we got Dodd-Frank when there was a supermajority in the Senate. We got Obamacare when there was a supermajority in the Senate. And so those things happened because the dynamics were absolutely perfect. And the political environment is so toxic right now that it's very difficult to find any level of agreement. And voters are rightly frustrated by that.
Yeah, I agree.
And they're assigning blame everywhere, by the way. President Obama's approval ratings aren't all that stellar. And quite frankly, our Republican candidates have the upper hand against Hillary Clinton for the most part. And so it feels like we can make some good progress here going forward. We just have to make sure we do it in the right way.
Congressman Reid Ribble, thank you very much for joining us today. Much appreciated, sir.
Good to be with you.
And we're back live, and I want to thank Reid Ribble for joining us today. Also want to thank Andy Parrish, who joined us today from his car out in Belle Plaine, Minnesota. And, of course, Andrew Malcolm, the Prince of Twitter, at AHMalcolm, and investors.com/Andrew Malcolm is where you can find him. I want to just preview Thursday. I don't know who's going to be on except for Jeff Dunitz. We're going to get Jeff back on the show. Not sure which slot we're going to put Jeff in. We're trying to nail down a couple different things. I know Dwayne's back. I'm not sure if he's ready to be doing the show, but I'm going to reach out to him, see if he is available, because, of course, Thursday belongs to him if he's around. So hoping to get the Eddie and Dwayne show back up and running. And great to see folks in the chat room, and I see that Cranky T-Rex just showed up. Coming in at the end, expecting the glory. You know how it goes. Yeah, it's a sad, sad thing. Anyway, it's great to have him in the chat room. At Cranky T-Rex on Twitter, crankytrx.blogspot.com for his blog, his personal blog, buzzpo.com. He writes for buzzpo.com. Occasionally does pieces for us, and we always love it when he does because he does great work. And, of course, the monster has been around all day. keeping the chat room safe for democracy. And you can find him on Twitter at Sum Ergo Monstro. And I believe his website is e3gazette.blogspot.com now. And so you can definitely find him on Twitter, though, at Sum Ergo Monstro. By the way, all of y'all should be putting your URLs and your Twitter handles up in the chat room. We're all about shameless blog and Twitter promotion here at the Ed Morrissey Show. So Thursday's show, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Central, 1 on the left coast. And we'll have a show. Not sure who's going to be on it except for Jeff Dunitz, who says he's taking the Hebrew slot. What the heck is that? Yeah, and Cranky, did you bring a note for being late to class? I'm just curious, you know. Might have to cut his pay in half. Who knows? I fire myself on a regular basis, so I don't know. I think a modicum of consistency is not unreasonable in these cases. At any rate. All right, let's play a little walking music. See who else has been in the chat room. The most fun part of the Ed Morrissey Show is, of course, the chat room. I'll play a little bit louder. There we go. Who else has been in the chat room? Conservative and Liberal Hands. Arnie A., welcome to the show. Comrade Breck. That must be Breck Nichols, my former shipmate on the Hugh Crew cruise. And one of the fabulous tribbles. Juanito Cabron. I think another fabulous tribble. Fausta from faustusblog.com. A great Western Hemisphere blog. I read it every single day. You should do the same. It's on my speed reader. Great stuff that she does there. Great work that she does there. And it's important. Keep an eye on it. Iron Ked. Jeff Dunitz from jeffdunitz.com. He's also at irantruth.org, I believe it is. And works for MRC TV these days as well. So pay attention. You can find out everything that Jeff is doing at jeffdunitz.com. Mr. Fastbucks, another one of the fabulous troubles. My sister's brother. TR4A, my cousin Mike. Always great to see my cousin Mike in the chat room. Nessikins, welcome to the show. Prairie Dog SD, great to have you back. Rick 2. SAA 5 of 5 keeps dropping out and coming back in, and we have to keep revoicing it. But that's okay. We'll keep doing it. SAA 5 of 5. Great to have you with us. Via Paso at the Ancestral Morrissey Mints. Hello. And the first mate behind me, keeping me on the straight and narrow. The straight and narrow. All right, folks, don't forget, Thursday we'll be back with more on the Ed Morrissey Show, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Central, 1 on the left coast. Until then, have yourselves a great afternoon, and don't miss a minute of the Ed Morrissey Show. We'll see you later.